I have made this mistake too. I mean, look at this. But now I can draw the same portrait like this. The biggest mistake you're doing in your portrait drawing is forgetting about the midtones. Let me show you the two most common mistakes that I see among my students in drawing portraits, and if you wait till the end, I'm going to give you all my solutions. So the very first common problem that I see is drawing your portrait without any midtones or shadows. What does this do? It makes your portrait look like a caricature. It is still art and it is still beautiful, but we need depth in realistic drawings, and this is why it's not going to look realistic. If you look closely, you will see that it was my issue in 2009 drawing as well. I was lacking depth because I had no shadows or midtones. So how to add these, right? After I explain the second problem, I'm going to also tell you how to add those midtones and shadows. So we got the first problem right, okay? No shadows and no midtones. The second most common problem I see among my students is adding the shadows, adding the highlights, but no midtones. So that's another problem. You will see it right here behind me that now I'm adding all these shadows, but then they don't look realistic. Still, it's lacking depth, right? It almost looks like in the end, this little kid cleaned a chimney. So we don't want that. We want them to look realistic and we want them to have depth. And in order to do that, we need to first soften out those shadows because there's a very sharp line between the highlighted areas and the shadow. So we're gonna soften them out and then add also some midtones. How are we gonna do that? Now I think it is time to explain. Now let's talk about the question then. What should we do then? Let me ask the two best mentor that I know in my life. Maybe they know the answer.
I think graphite is a good option here. Let's put a happy 2B shade there and give him a little friend 4B. Charcoal you use. When blend, perfect it is. Graphite. Charcoal.
Don't need to fight about it. Why don't we do both? While I'm sitting here and talking to you about all these midtones, behind me you see that I'm adding my favorite graphite shades for realistic drawing. So I have 2H as the base shade that I use for the lightest shadows, lightest tones, let's say, lightest shades. And then I have HB and I have 2B and 4B. Probably you know this, but by applying less pressure or more pressure, you can go up and down 2 degrees. For example, if you have an 2B pencil with just applying a little less pressure, you can go to HB. And if you maybe apply more pressure, then you can go up to 4B. This is the basic knowledge, but if you don't want to deal with that and if you already have these grades, then that's fine. That's even beautiful. That's perfect. And when you blend them, you will see that they create these nice other kind of midtones. They kind of blend really well. I'm using Faber-Castell 9000 here, by the way. Let's talk about what Yoda said, charcoal. If you want to use charcoal powder, I highly recommend General's charcoal and a brush. I've been using these brushes behind me. They are makeup brushes basically. You can just dip this brush into the charcoal powder and you can apply all these shades. I dip just once and I go from left to right. The shades are getting lighter. If I want to apply more blackness to it, I just go in with my brush again, I take some more powder and just add it onto my shades. Now we know what to use, but how do we use it? How do we use this knowledge? Let me show you. And if you're still with me, stay tuned because this will turn into this. First, charcoal. Please pay attention here because you will see that I'm adding all these lines around the eye with charcoal, but then what I'm doing is getting my small brush and picking up those powder from the eye lines and just smudge it around the eye. This way I'm going to get all the midtones that I need. I have perfect shades of gray. Perfect midtones for us, plus they have smooth transitions because of the brush strokes. Then I wanted to show you how to use graphite pencils. Look at the nose. So on the nose, first I added 2B. The 2B created these beautiful shadows, and afterwards I added the 2H pencil because the 2H grade gave this nice base light grade. And After that, I blended with my tissue because I wanted to have this smooth base as a first layer. And then second layer, I went with the darkest one, which is 4B that I have. I'm holding my pencil from the middle or back. I'm shading it very carefully without putting any pressure and just focusing on the darkest parts. And now it's time for my SEB method, shading, erasing, and blending. So I got my kneaded eraser, giving all these highlighted parts on the nose. And then, of course, I'm going to blend again. And this was my second layer or third layer. I stopped counting. But as a next layer now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to shade again. I have my HB pencil now, and I'm giving all the midtones between the eyebrows and the right side of the nose. Then, this time, I'm blending with a cotton swab. Why? Because I want them to stay darker. If I blend them with the tissue, they lighten up, and I don't want that. But after I blend with a cotton swab, I can go in and blend with the tissue. It's not going to give the same effect. Perfect. But remember SEB method? Shading, erasing, and blending. It's time to erase now and then blend it again. So as you see, we give a lot of layers with graphite pencils, but in the end, it gets a lot of depth thanks to our midtones. Is it harder to get the really dark shades with graphite? For me, I prefer for those darkest areas charcoal. So I dip my brush into the charcoal and add those darkest points on the nose with my charcoal. I think if we blend it later with the tissue again, it's just going to look very natural as if that was already graphite pencil. Remember our problem too, like adding shadows, but it doesn't look natural as if you just came out of a chimney. And how are we going to prevent that here? I want to show you that I added these really dark shadows with my charcoal and brush, but then you can see that with more brush strokes, without dipping it further into my charcoal, I can actually soften out those edges between the highlights and the shadows, which adds more midtones. And with whatever left in my brush, I can use it to give even more midtones around the face. I just like hit it. I hit the paper with my brush. Angry artist. Hit it. Now, as you see, they soften out and create this beautiful, smooth transition between the shadows and the lightest parts of the face. And now let me show you how we can get exactly the same result with charcoal and graphite pencil. On this side, you see that I'm shading with graphite 4B shade, and then I'm going to blend it. And you're going to see on the other part of the forehead, it is charcoal, and they're exactly the same. So you can do both ways with the both medium. But to be honest, charcoal takes much lesser time, but graphite gives you more control. Now you know both ways to give perfect midtones. Now you have to ask yourself which one is the best for you. I did portraits only with graphite, only with charcoal, and I mixed them too. So personally, I prefer mixing them both because I do feel like for the shadowed areas, charcoal gives much faster and much more beautiful results. But when it comes to giving depth, such as we did in the nose part, I think graphite gives a perfect depth. But you can give it, of course, with the charcoal as well, but I feel like having that control over my shading, I don't know, gives me a pleasure. Just call me a weird person, but again, it's all up to you, but mixing it also makes it perfect. Use the SEB method, shading, erasing, and blending. It's going to create miracles for you. And I want to warn you about something. Sometimes when we keep drawing, we feel like, okay, this is ready, this is good enough, such as right here. But then I feel like, let me try to add more layers and see what happens. And when you come to that point, I highly recommend you to add 2 or 3 more layers and see that if it's getting better or if there's no improvement at all. If there's no improvement at all, stop there. But if it's gonna make it much better, then there you go. Applying this SEB method, shading, erasing, and blending, helped you to get more depth in your drawing. Just like this. Do you want to see the difference? Here it is. It was just good enough. One is on the left, and after I do SEB method 2 or 3 more times, it is on the right. You can see that it got much more depth. If you're having trouble mixing charcoal and graphite, here is the video I done before, so you can check it out. I'm sure it's going to be really helpful for you. I'll see you there, and if not, I'll see you next time. Bye.